A capela la hacemos.
¿Qué tal? Bienvenido. Hola, hola. Hello. Please take seat.
Ah, sí, como dices Canchola, querido amigo. Sí, el mismo me dice, va a venir una reunión.
¡Ay, callate!
Benedicte.
Vamos a la
Mira. Dame el de José Francisco.
Well, let's get started. Well, welcome everybody. A great joy to see you all here. We are inaugurating both the Nordic Institute of Latin American Studies as well as the La Globe program at Stockholm University, the Master Erasmus Mundus Joint Master Degree, Latin America and Europe in a Global World. And these have been really big undertakings that our institute, together with many colleagues, have taken. I remember one phrase from, I think it was Sean Connery, he got a prize, he said, "I feel like I fought 5 rounds against the boxer Mike Tyson, but I won." So it's a bit like that, and we are very happy to be here this moment and to be sharing this with all of you. Let me just thank the President of Stockholm University, that we have some words here, her presence. She has been enormously important for all this, and I don't think we would have got to the La Globe program without her support from the beginning of all this. We have authorities from Stockholm University, the Dean of the Humanistic Faculty that will be joining us in a moment. The board of the new institute with the president, Benedicte Bull, we will present all of them later on. The La Globe Consortium with our colleagues from Salamanca and the Institute of Higher Studies for Latin America from Nouvelle Sorbonne in Paris that are here. We have ambassadors and diplomatic service. Very, very welcome to all of you. From the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Swedish authorities. We have a lot of friends from the Institute that have been with us during many years, former colleagues or colleagues from today, also from the Department of Roman and Classic Studies, from Stockholm University, and of course our dear students that are also here. What would we be without you? This is the soul of an academic institution, all our students that, you know, when we do all this hard work to do things, and then when we see you coming into the courses, taking fruit of everything that we are doing, and I hope that you are fine and enjoying this time, well, that makes us really, really happy. So that's why we are here, actually. So let me just very briefly welcome everybody to this inauguration, and I will give the word to the President of Stockholm University, Astrid Söderberg. Welcome.
Thank you, Andres. Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. As President of Stockholm University, I'm indeed both very happy and honored to have been invited to be present here today at the inauguration of our Nordic Institute of Latin American Studies and the launch of the La Globe International Master Program here at Stockholm University. We are very honored by the presence of such a large number of ambassadors as well. With the former Latin American Institute, Stockholm University already established a clear and important profile within this important part of area studies, which indeed has made its imprint on the university and on the outcomes from the university. Let me mention just a few examples. The director of the institute, Andres Rivarola Puntigliano, is the second on the list of top 50 among the most cited spokespersons in media within Stockholm University as a whole. And the third on the list is former director of the institute, Fredrik Uggla. And Latin American Studies is the fourth most mentioned research area at our university. This also makes it clear that this institute is and has been important in profiling Stockholm University nationally and internationally, and increasing our visibility as a university, and our importance and relevance for society. This new Nordic profile of the institute, which I'm very, very pleased about, strengthens this, and the participation in both European and other international networks also form an important part of its visibility. The objective with the new Nordic profile is that the institute should become a hub, a strong hub for Nordic collaboration within this field, as well as for identifying new possible synergies. Being a Nordic platform, this also means that the Institute will, of course, open up globally towards the world, but with an even stronger and broader local basis here in the northern countries. International collaboration also opens new possibilities to expand and to attract a larger number of international students. The La Globe International Master Program, offering a multiple master degree within Erasmus Plus, Erasmus Mundus, and involving the University of Salamanca, Sorbonne Nouvelle in Paris, and Stockholm University, accepts 20 new master students each year. The program aims at offering high-level education in social sciences and humanities on global phenomena in Europe and Latin America, but also at contributing to the establishment of an EU CELAC common research area. I cannot say how proud and pleased I am that we've been able to realize this ambition together with our partner universities. I remember a lunch with the president of Sorbonne Nouvelle a number of years ago, and then we thought it was a very distant vision, and now we are here and it's a reality. Finally, a small example on synergies and on the potential for our new institute. Tomorrow in Aula Magna, as you know, there will be an event on feminist vanguard and social mobilization in Latin America, financed by the La Globe program. After only 2 days since the event was launched, there had already been 12,000 unique visitors on the web. This really reveals the great interest and relevance and the need for knowledge which NILAS is now in place to meet. And there have been hundreds and hundreds of sharings and expressions of interest to participate in the event. So what I would like to do today is, above all, to congratulate NILAS director Andres Rivarola Puntigliano, together with Nordic and Swedish colleagues, and also thank you all from my heart for all your hard work that you have put in to make this come true. And I wish you the best of luck and a great success for our new institute. And I hereby proudly declare the Nordic Institute of Latin American Studies, as well as the La Globe program at Stockholm University, opened. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, now we're going to present the board of the new institute. Please come forward. So we have to have a presentation from each of the members of the board, starting with Professor Ken Benson.
Okay. Well, my name is Ken Benson, and I'm a representative in this board as I'm the Vice Dean of the Faculty of Humanities, and in the bottom I am Professor of Spanish-speaking literature at this department.
Good evening. My name is Maria Clara Medina, and I'm from the University of Gothenburg here in Sweden. So I am the second member, the Swedish member of this board, and I'm here in my two functions. One as a representative of the School of Global Studies from the University of Gothenburg, and secondly, as the president of the CESAL, that is the European Council for Latin American Research. So it's my pleasure here to be also representing both perspectives. The macro-regional as an European organization like CESAL is, but also bringing that together to the micro-regional as the Nordic collaboration countries. Both Stockholm and Gothenburg University are one of the most prominent universities in the Nordic countries when it comes to Latin American studies. And this has been a long tradition for both universities. So we are very proud, I'm very proud to be part of this project. Thank you.
President of Stockholm University, excellentísimos embajadores, mina damer och herrar, hyvät naiset ja herrat. It's my great pleasure to be here as representing the Finnish side of Latin American studies. I remember I, for the first time, came to this institute in 1983 to having the grant of Nordiska Samfundet for Latinamerikanska forskning, the Nordic Association of Latin American Studies, and I got a small grant and I was doing MA thesis, so I have the long love for this Nordic cooperation, some kind of Nordic continentalist tradition that we are continuing here. It's a great moment for us who have been working with many seminars, workshops and research projects, and also organizing many Latin American conferences in Nordic countries, also around the world. So it's a really beautiful moment for us all, and I feel that I can also present somehow not only the University of Helsinki. I'm working there as a professor in area cultural studies and professor of regional and area culture and Latin American studies also, and vice dean of the Faculty of Arts, and at the same time also the Finnish University Partnership UNIPID project had accepted me and represented all the Finland, not only one university. So really happy to be here with very loved Latin Americanists all around the world, which I see around. Thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Georg Wink. I'm Associate Professor for Brazilian Studies at the University of Copenhagen, representing Denmark. I'm also directing our Center for Latin American Studies at the same university. And like my colleagues, I'm extremely pleased to be here at that moment, to live this moment, because I think we finally got now a robust platform for synergies, the keyword which has already been mentioned. And when I say synergies, I think these along 3 lines. The first one is really to better integrate our activities which are ongoing in the 4 countries. We all have wonderful contacts in Latin America, but sometimes we don't know about what our neighbors do. And it's only a small, short, maybe even train ride away, right? And the second one, that is, we represent different disciplines, and Latin America is such a complex region, and this platform will also strengthen a lot the interdisciplinary dialogue between us. And the last one, as I'm a Brazilianist, is about also my expectation to have a better integration between the scholars who work on Spanish-speaking Latin America and on Brazil, because there is a kind of, sometimes there's a lack of communication. I think NILAS will perfectly be able to contribute exactly to these impacts. Thank you.
Well, I will say some few words for our part here at the Institute in this board. We had a meeting the other day with a Mexican colleague from the UNAM, the National University of Mexico. They have 370,000 students. This is a giant. I mean, that's in a global world where we are moving. Our unit, our university, or Nordic University are quite small in with these huge global giants. Right? We think that getting together will help us to get synergies and to be able to make us more attractive and to contact Latin America in a much better way, since we kind of in a common Nordic fashion get together to foster the contacts with Latin America. So we think this Nordic cooperation will enhance and promote the Nordic Latin Americanism, but also our possibilities to contact colleagues and universities in Latin America and other parts of the world, such as China. We have many contacts. There are many universities in the world interested in Latin America, so this is getting really of a global scope on these issues. So this is one of the ideas with this Nordic, finding these Nordic synergies, which is a very old project in the 1970s that we have now got through with this initiative. And we have this is a very important thing to say, we have a very good spirit within this group. And you see Pakasvirta is almost convincing me that tango might be a Finnish invention. Sorry, they are the master. But this is a very good thing. We work very well together, so this is the beginning of something very important. And now I will give the final word to the president of the new president of the board of NILAS, Professor Directive Board.
Thank you very much. My name is Benedicte Bøhl. I'm a professor of political science at the University of Oslo. I have led for the last 12 years what is called still the Norwegian Network for Latin America Research. That was one of the few initiatives taken in Norway to really create a joint platform to generate more interest for and to learn how Latin America to cooperate more at a broader basis with Latin America. But still, Norway, whatever we do, we will always be very, very small in this world that is about Latin American studies and Latin America in general. So I'm really very thrilled about being able to be a part of this Nordic initiative. In Norway, I've also led for the last 5 or 6 years the Oslo Academy of Global Governance. I come from a mixed discipline, but including also international relations. So I think what I want to contribute here is to strengthen the Nordic platform for creating kind of positioning the Nordic countries, giving us a common identity in a global world that is very much in a process of change. To strengthen our research on many issues, we know that here in Sweden you have a much stronger tradition on Latin American studies than what we do, no matter how many oil money they spend to try to beef it up lately. And also in Denmark with their strong traditions, and in Finland with their not so long traditions, but with a lot of energy into...
An old PhD program.
And the only PhD program, sorry. And we've already started our work, and I think we've already shown that jointly we're very efficient. We have agreed on at least 3 lines of work that we are going to start with very soon. We're going to strengthen the kind of infrastructure, the organizational platform. It can't be just that we've changed the name of the Latin American Institute at the University of Stockholm. We have to make this something very new, and then we need a kind of new way of showing that, and new administrative resources. We will also develop joint PhD courses and summer courses. That's the start. Continuing with more ambitious educational program in the years to come, hopefully. And we are going to establish a set of associated scholars, associated institutes that will kind of show who actually are associated with the Nordic Institute, and create kind of a common community among Latin America scholars in the Nordic countries. We are very excited to start this work, and I'm incredibly excited to start that. And I know that we have, I'm going to have the chance to say a little bit about the history of the initiative to create a Nordic Latin America Institute in a few minutes. That fell flat for a number of reasons. I think we have all what it takes to really get this 50-year-old dream come true finally.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we go to the next part of the program, which was the inauguration of the La Globe program at Stockholm University. So I would ask please the representatives from Salamanca University and University of Bonn So, the La Globe program is the Erasmus Mundus Joint Master Degree Program, is a program within the framework of the EU programs of Erasmus Plus. And the name of this program is Europe and Latin America in a Global World. So we got the financing from the EU Commission for this for 5 years, and we possibility to get some more years. We have grants for students that start the program initially in Salamanca, then they come another term in Stockholm, they then turn to Paris, and the last term they will go to Latin America, where we have 7 associates, academic associates, and then we have different non-academic partners from different organizations and companies and so on. So the students have the possibility to do the fieldwork for the academic thesis and also do internships in different NGOs and private sector organizations. And we have several of these students here today. They are full finance for 2 years, and we encourage you ambassadors, all of you, to spread this to your countries, so we have more students applying to this program. We actually want to have students from the whole world. Actually, we are now dealing with the interviews of students. We have, how many interviews do we have? 40 interviews with students from Korea, from Paraguay, well, no, not the least, Kazakhstan. So I mean, this is really exciting, and it is a global interest on Latin America and Europe issues. But then that's the thing. The point is to set Latin America, not only in Latin America, but Latin America from a global perspective. The relationships with Europe, with the United States, with China, with Africa, and so on. So I mean, this is a bit of the, we think this is the modern way of seeing different parts of the world, not as isolated, but as connected with each other. So that is really, I think, our main approach. So we have a brief presentation of you two and your universities.
Thank you, Andrés. Señora Presidenta, señores embajadores y estudiantes. Me llamo Capucine Boisdin, yo soy directora del Instituto... yes, in English, sorry. I feel more comfortable in Spanish, sorry. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm from Sorbonne Nouvelle, I'm from l'Institut des Hautes Études d'Amérique Latine, and I'm very proud to be here to inaugurate both NILAS and La Globe. All my colleagues in Paris were very interested by this new Nordic association, and they send you all their congratulations, interest, and support. I think that Latin Americanistic academic communities in Europe have strong identities, partly because they were built on solidarity and intense reflections with immense, brilliant intellectuals forced to exile during the 70s and 80s in the Cono Sur. And now we are facing new changes in the governments in Latin America, strong social movements demanding social protection, gender equality, and sustainable growth. And I think that Sweden, Finland, Norway, and Denmark are countries known for their commitment with peace, women, and environment. I think you have a special role to play in international relationships between Europe and Latin America through this new Nordic Institute. And this new institute can be at the core of those cooperation. And this leads me to my final point. The Erasmus Mundus Joint Master Degree, patiently built over 10 years. NILAS, you started 50 years ago. For this master, we've been working for 10 years between Salamanca, Stockholm, and Paris. It's a wonderful adventure, and only the first step towards new project. I think that we have to work at a PhD level and to think about future for our master's students. If they want to do a PhD, what can we offer them? And that a good way to construct an European space of higher education and to fortify deeply our relationship between Latin America and Europe. So please, all our congratulations and with our enthusiastic support.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Buenas tardes. My name is Francisco Sanchez. I'm director from Instituto de Iberoamérica from the University of Salamanca. I want to say only thank you for all the support for the Laureate program. That is very important for us. I don't want to say more because Capucine say all about the project. And I want to say only thank you for all the support. Andres was very important, many work for this program, and I will be working for more emotional projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is really have been a collective work to get here together with the colleagues here. Sometimes I think we have related more to each other than the colleagues that I have here in the department, because it has been very, very intensive during many years to get to this stage of this program. But also this is a collective and important work and effort for the Department of Romance and Classic Studies, where the Institute belongs. For Stockholm University, we have met along this way. I mentioned the role of the president, but there are many, many people here. A lot of them have been invited to this inauguration, because without all of you that have collaborated with this in many different ways, this have never been possible. So a big thanks to all of you that have been part of this undertaking, and I hope you feel proud of this, and there will be more, hopefully, and hopefully inspire others at Stockholm University to go along the same way, because I think this is the future, to get these joint programs at the European level with several universities, and to find synergies among our universities to reach these global markets of students. Now the challenge is how we do it in an ecological way, so we don't have to travel so much, but that's another issue. Thank you very much. Well, the last part are some words from the new president of our board, Directive Board, that will give us a speech on the Nordic and European relations with Latin America and the role of universities. Benedicte, welcome.
You know, I'm Norwegian, so I can only speak about the Nordic. The European is not our part. We're not even a member of the European Union. That's some of you know.
You're nearer than Great Britain.
Excellencies, again, excellencies, colleagues, friends, students. It is really a great honor for me to be here as the president of the board of the new Nordic Institute for Latin American Studies. The idea of this is not new. It's actually the first time the idea of a Nordic Institute was launched was even before I was born. It was in 1968. It was supposed to be the third pillar of a structure also consisting of the Africa Institute in Uppsala here in Sweden, the Asia Institute in Copenhagen, and the Latin America Institute was supposed to be in Oslo. That never happened. And actually, I was quite surprised when I looked into the history of this, because it was the Norwegians themselves that found out that we can't pull this off. We don't have enough researchers, we don't have enough resources, and of course they started to fight about where it was supposed to be. We pretty much always do that. And in the end, it never happened. So, for that reason, as a Norwegian, to be able to be the president of the new board, although it's now in Sweden, is a real honor. I think the reason why this actually happened, the main reason has a nombre y apellido, and that's Andrés Rivarola. I think we have to realize that, but there are also many other factors involved here. I think it would not have happened if there were not a need, a demand, and a desire for such an institute. And I'm going to say a little bit about why I think that is so now and why not before. When the first idea of a Nordic Institute was launched, it was in the context of two broad kind of global movements or features. It was the Cold War and it was the Third World Movement. And here in Scandinavia, one particular part of that Third World Movement that was very important for generating interest for Latin America in general and Latin American research in particular was, of course, the Cuban Revolution. Before the Cuban Revolution, there was very little in terms of Latin America studies in the Nordic countries. And I see that there are some people here that actually lived this time, and I did not, so please correct me, but do it afterwards. There was actually a program for indigenous cultural studies at the University of Copenhagen. That was the Central American Indigenous and Language and Culture, established already in 1949. Of course, the predecessor of this institute was the Ibero-American Library and Institute here at the Stockholm School of Economics, was established already in 1958. And it was later incorporated into the University of Sweden. But apart from that, apart from a few anthropologists, some historians, archaeologists, that ventured into Latin America, this was not really a big issue in terms of research interest until after the Cuban Revolution. The context of the 1960s was then increasing groups of students that looked to Latin America to find the seeds of a global revolution. So Latin America, at least in the history of my country, was even more a kind of a source for ideas of changes in the world, as it was a research topic in and of itself. Here in Sweden, Olof Palme was the Prime Minister, supporting, showing strong commitment to different social movements across the world and in Latin America in particular. However, it was another event in another development that would become even more important actually for how Latin American studies developed in the different countries at the time, and that was the establishment of aid agencies that happened in the 1960s, a little bit before actually in Norway, a little bit later in Finland, but generally that was established in the 1960s and contributed strongly to both funding and to kind of giving a direction to what topics that were on the agenda. And then came another very pivotal event, and you see a strong increase in interest in research in Latin America, and that was the coup in Chile in 1973. First, it brought some strong diplomatic efforts on parts of the Nordic countries. Finland got its Tabani Brotteros, if I pronounce that right. My Finnish is really terrible. Here in Sweden, Harald Edelstam, and we had our Frode Nilsson that continued to be a hero among in the Latin American community, although until he passed away just a few years ago. And there were different kind of connections that were made at the political level. And then I would say a main narrative behind Latin American studies from then on was the establishment of it was about solidarity. It was how to contribute to change, not only in Latin America, but in the world in general. In the early 1970s, there was also a decision made by the Nordic Council to support a Nordic association, or actually a Scandinavian association it was then, for research on Latin America, NUSALF. It was established in 1973 to kind of give attention to different matters in the region. Because of this kind of the birth of Latin American studies, a main current was dependency theory. It was about world system theory, anti-imperialism, however, with different flavors, of course, in different institutes in the different countries. Here in Sweden, there was always a stronger attention also to regional integration issues, to economic development issues in general. In the country I come from, there was a strong attention from the beginning to environmental issues and a lot of critique against Norwegian companies that were already involved in Latin America. not always in the best ways. And in Denmark, interestingly, indigenous peoples come out as important from the very beginning, interestingly, because it's the only Nordic countries that does not have its own indigenous population. And then came the new flow of Latin American migrants from Uruguay, from Brazil, Argentina, but first and foremost from Chile, here to Sweden and to my home countries and the other Nordic countries. In this period, there were several centers for Latin American studies that were established. It was one at the University of Aarhus. There were others, but a Nordic initiative was pretty much off the agenda. Actually, there was an attempt in the early 1990s to reinvigorate this idea and create it in Norway as it was originally planned, but again, it fell apart in internal struggles and lack of resources. In the 1970s and 80s, again, it was events in Latin America that drew a lot of the research agenda, particularly the wars and the revolution in Nicaragua and the wars of Central America. That generated interest in new topics and also new aid to the region and new topics for the aid agencies. But the Central American wars was also one that divided the Latin American communities, I would say, in the Nordic countries. Of course, the Nordic countries always balanced in somehow between being allies of NATO, members of NATO and allies of the United States, and with a Latin American community that was highly critical of the United States actions in the region at the time. In Norway, that was resolved with a kind of a compromise within the Labour Party, that the radical parts of the Labour Party, they were given kind of Latin America, and the more conservatives were dealing with relations to Europe, to the Soviet Union, and to the United States. And that had the consequence in the long term that Latin America got increasingly marginalized in the agenda, both research-wise and in general, I would say. But the 1990s created a whole new context. Latin America fell out of focus in general of global politics, while democratization and the market orientation and political stability strengthened business interests and other kinds of interests in Latin America. Aid initiative started to become much more diversified, going into new areas, gender, environmental areas, human rights, and peace, particularly in the case of our country, but also several others. I have to say that I'm very obliged to Andres Revarola for the following argument that I find very convincing. He drew my attention to the Swedish researcher Olof Tonander, who again draws on another Swedish thinker, which is Rudolf Kjellén, who it was Olof Tonander that argued that the Nordic countries at this point in the 1990s, after the fall of the wall and the changes in the world context, opted for what he called the geopolitics of the weak. We were no longer kind of having to balance between the big superpowers. Of course, the Nordic countries have never been in the position of trying to dominate the world themselves, but rather interested in creating as peaceful and as prosperous conditions in our context as possible. And that meant also working in multilateral institutions, trying to create clear rules for global affairs. The institutional context, of course, also changed very much for the different Nordic countries as Sweden and Finland became a part of the EU, and Norway chose to stay outside. After that, for most of the Nordic countries, the engagement in regional integration, democracy issues and development, human rights, and many other topics were, for Sweden and Finland and Denmark, were partly pursued through the European Union. Norway chose its own path called the politics of engagement, which led Norway among other things, to get involved in the peace negotiations in Guatemala, later Colombia, and later Venezuela. I would say the political changes occurring in the 1980s and 90s had very different consequences for Latin American studies in the different contexts. In Denmark, and I built this on Danish researchers, so the Danes around here must correct me again. In Denmark, the situation for social scientists working on issues far away in general got really difficult with a number of organizational reforms. I would say that Finland, to the contrary, really strengthened the focus on Latin America in this period with the establishment of the Ibero-American Center at the University of Helsinki in 1986, and later in 1992 it's the first Latin American program that now, as you see, has reminded us, has the only PhD program in the Nordic countries. Norway got its first research coordinator, but again, no stronger kind of initiatives, while Sweden continued to be, I would say, the leading actor in Latin America studies in Latin America. Also, not only with the center here, but also the one in Gothenburg, and which is one of the oldest. I forgot to mention that in the introduction. The NUSA, the Scandinavian Association, organized since 2001 Nordic meetings for Latin American researchers. In a more organized way. They had more informal conferences for many years on a smaller scale, but the NILAS conferences started in 2001, and that is the immediate background for the establishment of NILAS, I would say. Yet several other kind of developments at the global scale also affected Latin American studies in the years after 2000. On the one hand, the attacks of the Twin Towers in New York shifted world attention definitely away from Latin America and towards the Middle East. And in countries where the attention to Latin American studies, like in my countries, were pretty marginal to start with, that really took it off the agenda for a little while. At the same time, globalization led to the emergence of so-called global studies, and several Latin America research and study departments were subsumed into the global studies headline. However, it was just a few years before the so-called pink tide that caught attention among governments, particularly social movements and other groups across the world. The pink tide in Latin America. In Norway, that led to, that coincided with a center-left government that established the Norwegian Network for Latin America Research that I led, but, and also a program for funding of Latin America research that was first led by a Swede, Rikard Lalander, and then a Dane, Helge Gravborg. So for all the time, most of these initiatives have had some kind of Nordic flavor. So in many ways, through all these years, the Nordic dimension has been present, but never really resulted in a Nordic Institute for Latin American Studies. So what has changed? I think there are many things that have changed. First, there is a sense that existing regional and global institutions are weakened on many fronts. We all know that the EU is struggling to get past breakfast and Brexit, and a number of other challenges. Global institutions are struggling similarly, being undermined and challenged on many fronts by old powers and new powers. We see new global powers emerging. China is an obvious one, which you see the shift of the kind of the center of gravity of global politics shifting east towards what some would call the Eurasian global power. We see Russia in a whole new role. And the global competition is no longer about socialism and capitalism, as I see it, as it was when the first idea of the Nordic Institute was launched. It is rather about different forms of capitalism and whether there is a role for democracy in all that. And where the movement in Latin America continues to inspire globally, maybe not so much as they did in the 1970s. Today, a lot of groups look for examples or paths to follow towards a more just and democratic future precisely in the Nordic countries. In this context, I believe there is really a need for an institute that can strengthen the relations between the Nordic countries, between individual researchers and individual countries in Latin America, but perhaps more than anything, create a kind of a common identity and understand better what we can offer Latin America and the world, and reflect jointly on how we can strengthen the relations and communicate and contribute both to finding better research and to creating a perhaps more prosperous world. The narrative of the last period when the Nordic Latin America relations boomed in the 1970s and the 1980s was that of dependency relations and against imperialism and military dictatorships. None of those things have disappeared from the world, but they have changed. There are transformations on all fronts, and we need new narratives to understand each other's and to understand ourselves. We live in a globalized world, and actually any government or business or NGO here in the Nordic countries, if they need knowledge about something in Latin America, they can just call some experts from Latin America, and vice versa. If Latin American governments or businesses or NGOs or whoever needs to know something about the Nordic countries, they can find some expert easily. So why do we actually need this center? I still think that we need a center to reflect on joint challenges and joint possibilities, and that is what I hope that we will achieve over some years. Maybe we can even end up creating a kind of Nordic School of Latin America Studies in more than the physical sense, but also in the sense of joint ideas. NILAS was born out of a desire of giving Latin America Studies a stronger Nordic identity. I don't think we need to, we don't want to make Latin America Studies less Latin, but perhaps less influenced by other global powerhouses in Latin American studies. It will be about creating a mutual understanding, space for debating social developments and creating a counterweight, maybe, to ever more polarizing narratives about what Latin America is and means to us, and what the Nordic countries can mean to anyone. I really have great hopes that after 50 years, this dream has kind of come true, but that we will really make it into a success. That depends, of course, on the board that just started to work, and I've already bragged about that we were really efficient in the first meeting. But we need to create this wonderful creature with some real content. There are, of course, also many risks of this. It can end up just being a change of the name. We will work hard for that not happen. We can end up being kind of the new a vassal state again, and I know very well that Andres Rivarola's specialty is geopolitics, so I think he has some plans for who's going to be in charge here. But I think I can speak for all of us that we really, really enjoy working together, and that is a really good start. This is actually regional integration from below, but with some undisputed visionary and energetic leadership that has to start with here from the University of Oslo. And I think we really, I would just like to end by really thanking Andres Rivarola. You put all your energy, your vitality of your Uruguayan part and combine that with the discipline and commitment of your inner Swede, and that is kind of what has brought this to a reality after many, many years, and I know it's not been really easy. But this new Nordic community, this sort of Nordic, it's not hard to delimitate the Nordic countries. It has clear borders, but we are also very welcoming to others. We have already named several honorary Nordics from Paris, from Salamanca, from Hamburg, and there's many other nationalities present, and you're all welcome. So I would just end by saying that I'm really proud and happy to be able to be a part of this new chapter on Nordic research, Latin American research, and I'm sure it's going to be a really exciting and fun one.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Benedicte. Great words. Well, we are about to finish this part of the inauguration, then we will have an official toast. I just wanted to say, I didn't mention we also have the presence here of the embassies of Spain and France, Denmark and Finland. Very great to have you here as well. It's not only the Latin American diplomatic community. In the case of Finland, I don't know if you mentioned, perhaps the most Nordic country of all. The first initiative for the Nordic Institute was from Finland in the 1970s, and the second was actually Jussi Pakasvirta in the Norland in Gothenburg in 2017. So great to have this strong Finnish presence here at the Institute. I just also wanted to present a couple of our colleagues at the Institute, Thais Machado Borges, which is lecturer in Latin American Studies, and Magnus Lemke over there, also lecturer in Latin American Studies. Without Magnus, there will be no La Glover, probably. Very hard work in all this. And Uluf, our new librarian, where is Uluf? There you are, Uluf Rodriguez Orquestet, which is the new librarian of Latin American Library. We are very proud of this library. Have been building up this since the 1950s. And we said that we have around 15,000 volumes around, I don't know. But we're working on this. Well, just to end, to say something about tomorrow, we will have an event at the Aula Magna, where we will have an open lecture with a performance from a Chilean collective called Las Tesis, that come directly from Chile, or now indirectly, maybe through another European country, but anyway, they will be here, and it will be about the feminism and the social movement in Latin America, with also a lecture of Professor Ulrike Bluefield from the GIGA Institute, the Global Institute of the Hamburg University, and I think you have origin in Finland, maybe?
Yes, I'm actually originally from
Yeah, everything is getting Nordic. Very welcome. Great to have you here, and I hope you come tomorrow to listen to Ulrike and get here in time. I think we have had 17,000 looks at our announcement for tomorrow's event, so it will be a great thing. Well, I think we end up here. Thank you, everybody, and welcome back to the Institute. Thank you. We will have a picture with the ambassador.